girl picked the wrong day to film this. It is like 30 degrees outside. I've had to shut the windows, I've had to turn the fans off, and the lights in here make it very, very hot, so I'm going to try and get through this as quickly as possible. I always think it's nice to have the mice out with me when I film this kind of video, but it is too hot to have another body anywhere near mine at the moment, and I also don't want them to poop on my new dress. But hello guys, welcome to today's video where I thought I'd react to unpopular mouse opinions because I filmed a rat version a couple of weeks ago and it's only fair to do a mouse version. But as always with this kind of video, just a quick disclaimer, this is just my personal opinion. No. This is just my personal opinions based on years of owning mice, years of doing research, and years of talking to various different people. So if you have a different opinion, I would love to hear those in the comments, or if you also agree with a specific topic, then let's have a discussion in the comments. Okay, so the first one is, a 10-gallon tank is fine as the minimum. I heavily disagree with this one. So you will never see me recommending 10 gallons as the minimum for a single male mouse or 2 females. I just think it's far too small, and unfortunately there are a lot of resources out there like pet stores or outdated care guides that will recommend this for mice. I will always push for mice to have the exact same standards as hamsters, and that obviously varies depending on where you are in the world, but 80 by 50 centimeters minimum, just because they are as active or sometimes even more active as hamsters, and if you have multiple of them, it really makes no sense to me to have them in a much smaller enclosure. I do think because mice are commonly used as lab animals and also as feeders, a lot of people seem to think it's much more acceptable to keep them in smaller enclosures. But long term, a 10-gallon tank, in my opinion, is way too small to provide them with everything they need to be happy and enriched. So if we take a random 10-gallon tank from Petco, for example, this one is 50 by 25 centimeters of floor space, and that is just far too small to give them everything they need and more. Once you've got a wheel, a hide, a water bottle in there, there's not going to be much more space for other enriching items that they really need, like cork clogs, chew toys and things like that, climbing activities. It's going to be very, very cramped, and especially if you're keeping multiple females, you are going to want to have multiple water sources, multiple wheels, multiple hides, and you just can't squeeze that into a 10-gallon tank. So for that reason, no, I don't like 10 gallons as a minimum. I do think we should be pushing for much higher standards that we're now starting to see in hamster care. Things like 80 by 50 centimeters or 40 gallon is going to be much better because they are so active. The next opinion is, mice should be given as much bedding as hamsters. I do agree to some extent. I do think mice require a lot of bedding, more than some people give them, because they like to dig and forage and make burrows, and that is a really important behaviour. It can be quite tricky depending on what cage you've got to give mice, say 8 inches, 10 inches of bedding. This cage, for example, if I was to put a hamster in here, I would fill this almost to the top with bedding, but hamsters don't really utilise climbing space or climbing toys the way that mice do. It is quite important with mice to give them climbing activities. Obviously the floor space is more important, but mice will utilise climbing toys and accessories, and if I was to fill this with bedding for the mice, there wouldn't be much room for everything else, so it's about finding a balance. But I do think it is really important to give mice a deep layer of bedding or substrate, a bit more than this because I did run out, but I do think it is really important, and we should be going more towards how we care for hamsters rather than keeping mice on things like fleece where they can't dig around and forage. Next opinion is, male mice should always be neutered and housed with females, never alone. Now yes, in an ideal world I do think it is the best case scenario for male mice to be neutered and living socially as they're meant to, but that is not a reality for everyone, and I do think it's really important to recognise this, that some people don't have access to exotic vets or exotic vets that will neuter an animal so small such as a mouse. So it would be really narrow-minded of me to sit here because I do have access to vets that will do this, and I do have access to rescues that do neuter mice before you even adopt them. So if I was to sit here and say every male mouse should be neutered and you're cruel if you're not doing this, I think that would be very narrow-minded, because there are a lot of countries that don't have access to this and they still have mice, they still have male mice, whether they're feeders or pet store mice, and they can't help that. My friend Erin, for example, who is Erin's Animals on YouTube, she had a male mouse and she lives in a country that has very limited access, if not no access, to exotic breeders like mouse breeders, rat breeders, and she has no access to exotic vets really, so that male mouse was not neutered. And I do think there's a lot of cases out there where male mice still exist, they can't help that, and it's not an option for them. So I do think best case scenario, if you can have this and it is an option, then yes, neutering is a really good option, but it's not accessible to everyone, and I don't think people should be shamed for this if it's not even an option. The next opinion is you need to have at least 3 female mice. I agree. I do think starting with 3 and trying to have 3 at all times, whether they're neuter male mice or female mice, is a really good option because the dynamics of a group is way better than the dynamics of a pair. And I talk about this all the time, but say for example if one of those was to pass away, you're then left with a lone mouse. So 3 is like the magic number.
3 is a magic number.
And I do think trying to stick to 3 or more mice at a time is a really good idea. Next is large enclosures are stressful for mice. I would say yes and no to this one because bigger is not always better if you're not providing any enrichment. If you have a cage like this and put one hide on one side and then just another hide on the other one and nothing in between but bedding, that is going to be stressful, that's going to be scary. They're going to feel like they have to dash between each hide if they're nervous, and that's not good. So bigger is not better if you're not packing it full of enrichment and hides and tunnels, because mice are a prey species. It can be very scary for them. So making sure if you have a big enclosure to put enough stuff in this is going to be better than having an empty bare enclosure just because it's bigger, if that makes sense. The next one is mice aren't empathetic. They eat their dead siblings and don't care. So this one is a common misconception. Both rats and mice are incredibly empathetic towards their cage mates that they're bonded with. And mice will do this because they are a prey species. If one of their cage mates has passed away of natural causes and you've not caught this within the first hour, half an hour of this happening, mice are a prey species. They don't want the smell of that dead body to attract any predators, and as a defense mechanism to protect themselves and to protect the group, they will clean up the body themselves, which is not nice to come across if you've been asleep while this has happened or you've been out of the house. And it can be quite a shock. I've never had this happen, but if you leave a body in there long enough, mice are going to take it into their own hands and try to clean up just to protect themselves. So it's not coming from a place of they don't care or they're not empathetic. They are literally just trying to survive. So the last one, and this one I think is going to spill the most tea and get me in the most trouble, is registered breeders not equal ethical breeder. So this I agree with 100%. I think whether you're going to a dog breeder, a hamster breeder, a rat breeder that are registered breeders, being on that registered list doesn't really mean anything when it comes to the Rat Society or the Mouse Society, because to get on that list they're not having to do a special test or they're not having to have inspections of how they care for the animals. They literally just have to be a member for a certain amount of time and then they can get on that list. So that does not guarantee that their ethics are going to align with your ethics or they're even going to be an ethical breeder in the first place. So even if you do find a breeder on a list, on a registered breeder list, always make sure you do your own research to make sure that you're comfortable in supporting that breeder. The difference that I've seen really is when it comes to rat breeding, most of the breeders that I know and I support, they keep their adult breeding rats that they're breeding from in big active cages, things like Laboratory Explorers or Critter Nation style cages. Obviously when they're not in maternity cages with their litters, they are in big active setups. And then on the flip side, when it comes to a lot of the registered mouse breeders that I've looked at, they do tend to use rack setups and small bin cage setups that maybe have like a toilet roll and one hide, and to me that's just not something that I can get behind and support. So I accidentally deleted the rest of the clips for the end of this video, but I think the point I was trying to make is that ethics are a really personal thing. Something that you might find ethical, someone else might not find ethical at all. So for me, I can't help but make comparisons because I'm so used to the way that rat breeders, ethical registered rat breeders work in the UK, because that is more my social circle, that I can't help but make comparisons to registered mouse breeders. And one thing I find really ethical about rat breeders, or the breeders that I know, is that they'll breed their females once, maybe twice, 3 times at a push in their lifespan, and then they're done and they're retired. But compare that to registered mouse breeders in the UK, most or some of them will house a male, an intact breeding male, in with a pair of females, a trio of females, and have back-to-back litters. But then in the rat breeding world, that is something that is quite frowned upon usually, so I don't know, maybe it's just something that I have to get used to and it's just the way things are. But for me personally, I do feel a lot better adopting or rescuing mice going forward because there's just not someone that is local, and also that I feel 100% comfortable with their ethics and how they breed their mice. So I've gone off on such a tangent on this one, but yes, being registered does not always mean ethical. But yeah, that is all of the unpopular opinions I'm going to talk about today. This video has been a bit of a hot mess. I'm sure there's many more I could talk about in a future video, but I hope you guys have enjoyed watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video.